Hey guys, got another pen video here for you. And I will apologize in advance. I'm a little bit under the weather right now. So if you hear me clearing my throat or pausing, it's probably because of that. So the pen that I have today is the Montverde Monza. And this is with an Omniflex nib. Now, I wanted to kind of show the package real quick because the package is a little bit more unique or different than, your standard pen coffin that you'll get with a lot of pens. So you'll notice you have this paper or cardboard kind of outer sleeve. You see that it's got its branding. It actually has a really nice picture of the nib itself with that unique cutout. And then it talks about it being a special edition fountain pen. Now you flip it over and it actually has some additional information. For instance, it says the Montverde USA Monza Flex Jolly Green Special Edition comes with an Omniflex nib. The fountain pen Omniflex nib is intricately designed and cut for maximum performance, allowing your creativity to soar to new heights. And then it kind of talks a little bit about the filling system and things of that nature. So, interesting little packaging. Now, the package itself, as far as the pen case, is very reminiscent of, to me at least, like a TWSBI type package, or even a Moonman package, such as the M2. This is a recycled material. I like the fact that it has that kind of frosted look to it, and of course it's in that green color. So I think it's kind of interesting. Now it pops open, and it's got a foam insert in here to kind of keep everything together. You'll notice your cutout here that the converter would have been in, and then you've also got your two cartridges here as well. Now, as far as the pen goes, obviously this pen design is definitely something that you've seen numerous occasions. And first thing that may come to your mind is possibly a Sailor 1911. In addition to that, probably for a lot of us, a Jinhao 992. Now, I do not own a Sailor 1911. I have a Sailor Pro Gear, but I'm not going to pop that in here. But what I will do is actually put a Jinhao 992 just to kind of show the comparisons between the two pens. Now, obviously, there's a price difference between these two pens. So your Jinhao 992 you can get for a couple bucks, generally between $2 and $5. The Montverde, being that it is branded with the Montverde logo, you're paying more for the pen. Now, I know Stephen Brown had done a review on the Monza and was somewhat critical of that, with the fact that you're getting an injection molded pen. Just a basic plastic pen, and you can buy the Jinhao for much less. There really wasn't, in his opinion, a need to purchase this pen when you can buy the Jinhao with pretty much all of the same bells and whistles. Now, and I definitely agree with that. One thing that drew me to this pen was the fact that it came with that flex nib, and I thought that'd be something interesting to write with and really just try out. So set the Jinhao aside for a second and, kind of look at this pen. And I mean, literally everything is reminiscent of that Jinhao that I just had in here. You'll notice that the clips are designed almost identically. There's really no differences. The cap bands are about the same size. You'll see here that it says Montverde USA, and then it has Monza on there. This is a twist off cap. It takes 1 1/4 turns to take off. And then it reveals that section and nib, of course. Now, one difference with this pen versus your Jinhao is it does have a clear feed, which I think is a nice touch. It's kind of cool. A lot of people like those clear feeds to kind of show off the ink that you're using. And it makes the pen fully transparent at that point. This is a pen that I would say you could eyedropper. I know the 992 you can eyedropper. So if you wanted to have the effect of having this barrel empty with just ink in it, you could obviously do that with this pen. Now, looking at the nib, It is not a very ornate nib. There's not a lot of designs on here. It literally just says Flex on it. Now you'll notice that it has those cutouts on the shoulders there to allow the tines to spread more easily. But really, I mean, the nib outside of that, there's not a lot to talk about. You do see it does have some nice tipping material up there as well. I would say that this definitely gives you a fine line. I don't see anywhere on the packaging that states if this is a fine nib for sure, but I would say that it basically is a fine nib. Now taking off the barrel, of course, you have this O-ring here just like you do on the Jinhao as well. Now one issue that I did have with this pen was the converter was somewhat difficult to get inside and really seal up on the nipple on this pen. And one of the things that I've noticed is there's a lot of dead space right here on this section piece right here and the converter, and you'll notice that I can move it around really easily. Whereas on a lot of pins, when you put your converter in it, it definitely seals up a little bit nicer. And that's one thing that I did notice. When I first put the converter in, I had issues getting it in. And when I went to I had some issues with some hard starts. I went to take the barrel off. I was going to prime the feed to see, or to really kind of look to see what was going on. The converter actually fell out. So, you know, I really just pressed down really hard and eventually got it to pop in there. So, I mean, I think it could have been user error, but just something to note that I think is something that if you happen to purchase this pen, you might run into that issue, and just to be aware of it. All right, guys. So I wanted to show this nib compared to some other flex styled nibs. Now, just to kind of get an idea, now this is not all the flex nibs that I own, but all 4 of these pens are currently inked up. So I wanted to kind of show some similarities and some differences in how the nib is structured and how you may get some of that flex experience. So starting from the right to the left, right here we have a Waterman. This is a Waterman 52 with that number 2 size nib. So a similarly sized nib overall. You know, this is obviously a vintage flex nib, and you'll notice that the slit in the nib is similar as far as how it doesn't go the entire length of the nib. Now granted, this is a gold nib, vintage flex, totally different on how it springs and everything else, but I did want to add this kind of in here. Now you've got your flex nib here, your OmniFlex nib, and comparing it to the nib to the left of it, you'll notice that you have an FPR, and this is the UltraFlex. They both have a cutout in the shoulder to allow those tines, really to allow for a softer flexing experience. Now, one thing you'll notice though is that the UltraFlex, the slit actually goes the entire length of the nib. Whereas on the OmniFlex over here, it has that breather hole and it stops right at that breather hole. So really the question is that going to impact the ability for the nib to flex? Is it going to create a more consistent line variation, a more consistent flow? Or are we gonna have issues, you know, between the 2 nibs? So when I do the writing sample, I will compare these 2 just so you can kind of see how the nibs work. And then also tell you what I'm feeling as far as feedback and responsiveness. And then over on the far left here, we have another FPR flex nib. This is the 14 karat gold version. However, it is very similar to the steel nib as far as the size and how it's made, in the sense of it has the long slit going straight from the end of the tines all the way down almost the entire length of the nib. So again, same idea as far as how it works. It obviously is made out of a gold material, so it's going to be a lot softer and subsequently easier to flex. So I just kind of wanted to show those pins. I'm not going to really do, I'll put some dimensions on the Montverde Monza in the on the screen for you, so that way if you're curious. Of course, the pen does post very well. It fits nice in the hand. I'll kind of show that in the writing sample. But I mean, other than that, the pen functions really well. All right, so up next, guys, we're going to have the writing sample, and then we'll finish up from there. All right, guys, we're back. And again, as I was stating before, the pen fits nice in the hand. I don't really need to post this pen, but if you did want to, it posts nice and it posts deeply. Just like the Jinhound 992, it's made out of a very light plastic material, and it posts deeply, so the balance of the pen is nice. So as I stated before, this is the Montverde Monza. And we have a Omniflex nib. All right. So you're noticing I'm having some issues here. Now I wrote with this pen for a while and have not had really any issues on it. Now, but I am having some flow issues right now. I'm just going to stop there. So let's talk about line variation. So here's basically no pressure at all. And then we'll add some pressure. And you know, you can tell I've written with this pen quite a bit because I mean, I've had a lot of ink. This is really the first time I've had this big of an issue with the pen. So I'm going to prime the feed. Now I did talk about earlier about there being an issue with, in my opinion, a seal from the converter on the nipple portion, and I don't know if maybe there's air getting in there. I do feel like it is much better now, but obviously there's still an issue with this. Now I wrote with this earlier today. You know, it's probably been sitting for a couple hours. I did not have any issues with it when I was writing, but now I am. Now I just primed that feed. So now you're seeing the actual flex of the nib. Now, this pen does require quite a bit of pressure. You know, it definitely, I don't really notice, you know, I mean, yes, you can get the line variation, you get a decent amount there. But, you know, as far as the flex experience, it's definitely not one of the best. Now, I only paid $17 for this pen. So it wasn't like it was a very expensive investment. I would say for everyday writing, this is a perfectly fine pen. For overall flex writing, it doesn't really wow me, which is really the purpose behind the purchase for me. So it does disappoint from that perspective. The nib, I think this nib would definitely benefit very similar to the FPR nib if it had a longer slit. You know, I don't know what type of, you know, how the metal was done, and I'm not an expert in any of that. So I'm sure there are other factors that would go into it. But I think the overall structure of the nib is not the best flex experience. So we'll compare it to this FPR. Now bear in mind, this is a number 6 size nib, whereas the Monza is a number 5. Granted, I don't think that really plays a big role into the flexing, but I did want to compare the two nibs. So again, this is the FPR Ultra Flex. And so we've got some line variation up here. So we'll just kind of go through this. That's the first time this nib has done that to me in a while. I'm clearly having issues. I wrote with both of these pens earlier and had not a single issue, but then the minute I go to do the video, now I'm having issues with flow. I've actually been writing with this pen for the last several days and have had no issues with it, but now all of a sudden it's deciding not to work on camera. But, you know, one thing I'll talk about, you know, as far as this nib goes, the overall ability to flex with it is very responsive. I mean, it is very nice. It does not require a lot of pressure to flex, and you can get some crazy line variation with this pen. And I mean, that's something that's really cool. I'm sorry, with this nib, it's something that's really cool on it. So, you know, just to kind of, again, give some comparison between the two pens, or between the two nibs. And I know some people, I've heard some people liking the Omniflex, but I've also heard a lot of people disliking it for various reasons. And, you know, I'm not very impressed with the overall flex experience that I have with it. So I definitely will not be buying another one. As far as the pen goes, you know, there's really nothing else to be critical about it. I mean, it's overall manufacturing of the pen is perfectly fine. Obviously, you're going to pay more because it has Montverde's logo on it. But I'm going to stick with my 992s. You know, they're cheap and they work perfectly fine, and I've never had any issues with them. Again, guys, I apologize. I'm a little bit under the weather, which I think is also impacting my ability to be able to think during this video. But I did want to get this video out to you guys. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. If you guys have this pen already, let me know what you think about it. Again, I paid $17.99 actually was the actual price I paid. I know you can get it on, I think, penchalet.com for $16. And I'll put a link in the description on some places that you can get it if you are interested in it. But the pen doesn't wow me. I don't ever regret any purchases, or I regret very few purchases with pens, so I don't regret the purchase, but I mean, I could have lived without it, to be honest. So guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, comment down below, let me know what you think. Until next time, everyone take care, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.